If you want to speak articulately and clearly at work, you're a leader or executive, this is for you. You're about to learn 3 main ways you can immediately improve your communication skills. The first way is to improve the way you ask questions. Now, you might be thinking, what do you mean? I know how to ask questions. Well, I'm sure you've seen someone who asks questions like this. Hey, yeah, I had a question. My question was, last week you mentioned that when we were talking about ABC subject that, when we're doing this project, for me, when we're working on it, the way we like to do things is, because I know you mentioned that, and then they just go on and on and on, and in your mind you're thinking, where are you going with this? What is your question? What is happening? Remember this. People will judge your level of intelligence based on the quality of your questions. People will judge your level of intelligence based on the quality of your questions. So if you cannot articulate your questions clearly, if you are struggling to find the right words to ask the question, people will not see you as a credible source of information. As opposed to, in the last meeting, you mentioned that you do it this way. Our team does it this way. Is there a reason you do it this way and not that way? Isn't that much easier to understand? It's clear. So what do most people do? What they'll do is, when they have a question they want to ask, this is their head, if you will, and they want to ask a question, what they will do, they have all of these thoughts in their head in no particular order, okay? And let's say you've got different shapes over here. You've got all of these different shapes, and these represent different thoughts. When they ask the question and they start speaking, they'll start speaking in no structure, just all over the place, random structures. And they'll start throwing all of this information, and the other person now has to think of all of these different things this person is saying and try to untangle them. What is your question? What it is that you're asking me? And then most people, they feel ashamed of saying, I don't know what you're saying. I don't understand the question, because either they'll feel stupid saying it, or they don't want to offend the other person, so they'll just nod their head and just say something random. And now you have a barrier in communication. So instead of just asking a question in no particular order, here's how you can do it. This is an easy framework to follow. The first thing that I like to do is start with context. This is the detail behind the question. Then you end by asking the question. People will remember what they hear last. People will remember what they hear last. So if your question is buried somewhere in the middle, it's going to be very difficult for people to know what you're asking. So you could say something like, in the last meeting, you mentioned XYZ and following this, whatever. I'm wondering, why do you do this way? I'm wondering, how do you do that? 1 or 2 sentences of context and then a question. That way, the last thing they hear is the question and they have just enough information. What you don't want to do is spin in circles and give them your entire life story before you get to the point. So remember this, people will judge your intelligence based on the quality of your questions. Think about what you want to ask, arrange it in context, provide them 1 or 2 pieces of details, and then ask the question and then wait for them to respond. Instead of I wanted to do this, and then well, what about that? And we're also thinking about this. Some people also have a habit of asking 5 questions in 1 question. I promise you, if you limit the amount of information you share, it'll become unbelievably easy for you to speak in a more articulate way and for you to get a clear answer. Number 2 is presenting data. Now, if you are in a role that requires you to present spreadsheets or numbers, a mistake a lot of people make is that they'll speak, they'll show the numbers, and that's it. Hey team, our marketing was $50,000 this month, and our expenses were this much, and this is how many sales we made. Thank you very much. Moved on. Unless someone knows what the number means, they are not clear on why you're sharing that information. So I'll give you an example. I have a marketing team, and sometimes my marketing team comes up to me and they show me a spreadsheet with 50,000 different numbers, right? And then they'll show it to me and say, these are the numbers. Any questions? And now I have to look at each number, think about what conclusions to make about each number, think about, is this number too high? Is it too low? Is this within industry standard? What were we aiming for? What was it last time? All of these things I have to consider, and then I have to ask questions. Why is this 60%? Why is this 4, not 5? Why are we spending this much on this? And now they're on the defensive and they have to answer and answer and answer. The problem is when you take this approach of just hear the numbers, you are in a passive role. You are not taking on leadership and ownership of the task. If you are presenting the numbers, what you need to back this up with, if you back up data, always bring conclusions. Or if you don't have conclusions, what it means. What does the number mean? So if you said our sales were 50,000 this month, okay, is that good? Is that bad? Is that more than what we were hoping for? Is that in line? What is it? Tell me what it means. Do we have a conclusion? Our sales are 50,000, which means the new marketing method we tried worked. Or our sales are 50,000, we were aiming for 70,000, so our new marketing method did not work as well. Can you see how the same number can be interpreted many different ways as long as it's backed up with conclusion? Because if you just throw a number at me, I don't really have any conclusion I can make for it. So again, being articulate means making it easy for the other person to understand. If you bring a spreadsheet or charts and just show it to someone, will it make it easy for them to understand? The answer is no. So always when you're presenting data, this means that. This means that. A great example I can think of is when Apple announced the iPad Nano, I believe. They said something along the lines of, it has 2 GB or 4 GB of storage, which means you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket, which means you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket. They could have said this has this many teraflops of this, it has this chip, this whatever. We don't know what that means. So whenever you're presenting data, remember this. Present data and tell people what it means. You need to have ownership. You are the expert. You're bringing in the data. It is also your responsibility to own what it means and to tell the other person in simple terms in a way they can understand. The last thing you can do to be more articulate is adding space. What do I mean by adding space? When you are speaking, there is a certain speed at which you are sharing information. Your brain cannot process unlimited information within a second. You need time and space to process it. So for example, if I was speaking at 1,000,000 miles an hour and I said, okay, so there are 3 different ways that you can speak in a more articulate way. The first way is that you have to ask questions that are much clearer, because most people, when they speak like this. It's all over the place. It's very, very confusing. The second thing you have to do is you have to present data. When you present data, you have to present a conclusion. Can you see how difficult it is for your brain? Like, you're just trying to follow and process what I'm trying to say. So when you're speaking and you want to make it clear in the other person's mind, you have to give them space to think. And by space, I mean when you have words, your words need to have space between them. And when you have a phrase, you have to add spaces between the phrases. So for example, as I am speaking right now, I want you to notice these tiny bits of silence that I have after my words and in between my sentences and my phrases. So I will say something and then I'll give you just a little bit of time to process what I've said before I throw new information at you. Because I might have said something remarkable, but if I just trample all over it and give you more information to consider, you're not going to follow along, and eventually your brain will not be able to catch up, and it'll just give up and tune out, even if you're trying to pay attention. So instead, make it a habit. Between your words and your phrases, allow for a bit of a pause. Just the tiniest bit. I'm not saying you have to pause in a way where you're building anticipation, although that does have its place. But as you're speaking, just add spaces between your words. So you can notice now, if I was talking like this and I was just going on and on and on, eventually you would be like, okay, how long is this guy going to talk for? Is he going to talk like this for the rest of the video? I can't really keep. But if I talk like this and I said, there are 3 ways for you to become more articulate when you speak. The first one is to ask intelligent questions. The second one is whenever you present data, you want to tell people what it means. And the third one is to add space between your words and your phrases. Those are the 3 ways that you can be an articulate speaker. Can you see how much more gravitas that added, how much more clarity that added? So these are the 3 things that you just immediately implement these, you're going to become significantly better at communication. I hope this helped out. Let me know in the comments on what you'd like to see next, and I'll see you next time.